What's going on, everyone, and welcome to the highly anticipated second episode of Sheesh A Mighty. That's right, my name is Hunter Boston, and finally got time to sit down and record another episode. I am really excited. It's been a couple of weeks, so we've got a lot to cover. It's basically going to be all NFL talk this entire episode. Going to run through all the playoff matchups that's happened so far, leading up to, of course, the big game, the thing we've all been waiting for all year, the Super Bowl. So let's just dive right into it. Let's not even wait. All right. So first things first. The last thing I talked about on this show was the playoff matchups. I believe going into the playoffs. I don't even think the playoffs had happened yet. I need to go back and listen. Probably should have done that before we started, but without further ado, let's just dive in. Of course, let's go to Super Wild Card Weekend, talking about some of them games. I really just want to paint the picture of how we got to the Super Bowl before I just really dive into that. So, of course, we've got to start all the way back at Super Wild Card Weekend with the Seahawks at the 49ers. Of course, if you've watched this game, the 49ers won 41-23. Brock Purdy continued his success coming from the regular season, 18 for 30 for 332 yards and 3 touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey came in and just did, 15 carries, 119 yards. And, of course, their do-it-all guy, Deebo Samuel, 6 receptions for 133 yards and 1 touchdown. In the first half, both of these teams were very, very similar, trading punches back and forth. I honestly thought that the Seahawks might have a chance to win this game, but that all changed in the second half. Because in the second half, Seattle could just not sustain drives to save their lives. I don't know what it was, but out of the 4 times they had the ball in the second half, they fumbled once, punted once, and had 1 interception. Literally could not get anything going to the very end of the game. And, all the while, the 49ers scored every possession in the second half until the last play of the game. So, yeah, I don't know. The Seahawks just could not get the ball rolling in that second half, and that doomed them because the 49ers just kept their foot on the gas, kept scoring. And, of course, that Niners defense had a big part in all of this. But, in hindsight, if you're a Seattle fan, I think you got a lot to hold your hat to. You did not know going into this season that you'd be playing the 49ers in Wild Card Weekend with Geno Smith as your quarterback. So I think you've really just got to build on that and just keep your head high. I mean, of course, the 49ers, they are going to go on to play the Cowboys. We'll talk about that in a little while. But yeah, so that was the first game of Super Wild Card Weekend. Going right into the next one, probably might be the craziest game of the playoffs yet. And of course, that was the Chargers at Jaguars. Jacksonville, of course, won this game 31-30. Came back down 27-7 at halftime. Went into the half down 27-7. The reason why? Because Trevor Lawrence also went into the half having 4 interceptions. I thought this game was over. I really did. I don't know what got into Trevor in that first half. He made some good throws. I mean, 1 or 2 of those interceptions were probably his receivers could have helped him out. But for the most part, just some bad throws by him. Just a bad half. I don't know if it was maybe some playoff jitters, but definitely did not come out swinging like they thought they would. And that all changed in the second half because the Chargers really fell apart. They really fell apart in that second half. They only ran the ball 7 times in the second half. There's no reason to throw the ball that many times up that score. You need to use up some more of your clock. They really got too complacent with their play calling with the big lead and allowed Jacksonville to scratch and claw back in, and that's exactly what they did. I mean, offensively, they took care of the ball. Trevor did not throw any more interceptions. That's great. You quit throwing interceptions, you're going to be in football games. Who would have thought? And then they got a lot of quick points. I mean, 14-play drive that lasted 7 minutes, 5-play drive that lasted 2 minutes, 9-play drive that lasted 3 minutes, and a 10-play drive that lasted 3 minutes. They scored quickly, and they took care of the ball on offense. That's exactly what needed to happen. And, of course, defensively, everything just started coming together for them. They were able to get quick stops, and they really limited Los Angeles' time of possession, and they just got the stops that were needed. So in the second half, they really played good complementary football together of just taking care of the ball, scoring when needed, and then the defense just getting stops. If at the end of the day, if you're a Chargers, they just do. The Chargers did what they always do, and that probably doesn't make any sense. But if you know the Chargers in the years past, that is the most Charger game of all time. Having a 27-7 lead at halftime, then blowing it, that's just exactly up the Chargers' alley. I hate to say it, but it really is. I don't know, just a complete collapse. You got to be disappointed if you're a Chargers fan. By now, you're probably over it, but I don't know. I'd still be a little disappointed if I was a Chargers fan, even right now. They fired their OC Joe Lombardi in the wake of the game. We'll talk about, that in a little while, but just disappointing for the Chargers and really nice for the Jaguars. But of course, they had to go and play the Chiefs in Arrowhead Stadium. We'll swing back by that in a little while. But yeah, so Chargers and Jaguars. Moving along, that was the Saturday games on Super Wild Card Weekend, but the Sunday games are actually really, really good too. First game was a little odd. It was the Dolphins at Bills. The Bills won that game 34-31. To be honest with you, the Bills did not play good in this game, and I don't know if that was a little bit of foreshadowing what was going to happen the next weekend, but we're not going to talk about that yet. But let's talk about this game. But they really didn't play well. Josh Allen, 23 for 39, 352 yards, 3 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions. I don't know. Josh Allen really turned into a interception machine, and going into this game, he had a lot, and he didn't. He really kept the Dolphins in this game. Despite the score, the game was really, really sloppy. Bad play from both teams caused the game to be as close as it was. The Bills really should have put the game away in the first half, but the turnovers caused Miami to stay in the game. They came out of the game with 423 yards to Miami's 231. The Bills did. But, they only had the ball 3 more minutes than Miami. Allen was sacked 7 times, and of course they had the 3 turnovers. They had a fumble as well. So it's just like, I don't know. This game shouldn't have been this close. Honestly, the way that they played, the Bills should have won by a landslide, but it was because of the way they played that they didn't. And like I said, we'll talk about the Bills. They would go on to play the Bengals in the next round. But I don't know. Dolphins, I don't know. You just got to find a quarterback. Skylar Thompson had a great game. Got him down to the last drive to possibly win it. It's just, you got to find a guy at quarterback. And then, of course, the Dolphins fired their defensive coordinator, and because their defense had not been the best all year, and definitely didn't help them in this game either, because the Bills really left the door open for them. They just could not go through the door. They just couldn't do it. They just couldn't beat them. So just an interesting game right there. It was a really great game, but it was because both teams played really bad, kind of. But yeah, so like I said, the Bills would go on to play the Bengals, and we'll talk about the Bengals here in a little while. But first, let's talk about the next game that happened that Sunday, and that is the Giants at Vikings. This was a crazy game because the Giants won 31-24. Yes, that's right. The Giants beat the 12-4, I believe they might have been, Vikings. The Vikings definitely were favored to win this game. But I don't know, though. At first glance, you're going to think, oh, what did Kirk Cousins do? He actually didn't play that bad, in my opinion. He went 31 for 39 for 273 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's going to get a lot of heat for the last play of that game when he threw the ball at least 3-4 yards short of the first down. But I don't think he played that bad. To be honest with you, my biggest takeaway from this game was just how good Daniel Jones played. Daniel Jones ended this game 24 for 35 for 301 yards, 2 touchdowns, 17 carries for 78 yards, and 81.2 QBR overall. And they also had big plays from Saquon Barkley as well. He had 2 touchdowns. So I don't know. I think this has more to do with the Vikings defense than it does with the Vikings offense. I think the Giants just straight up outplayed their defense, was able to keep up with the offense and just outscored them to win the game. Brian Dable literally had Daniel Jones looking like Josh Allen out there. I mean, it seemed like every time I looked up at the screen, that boy was scrambling for 5, 6 yards. I was amazed. I was literally like, oh, look, Daniel Jones, he's running again. Oh, look, Daniel Jones, he's running again. It's just amazing. And you got to be disappointed if you're a Vikings fan. But then again, you got to be like, well, this is usually what we do. So, unfortunately for the Vikings, a disappointing end of the season. But good on the Giants. They of course are going to go on to play the Eagles. You probably already know what happened in that game, but we'll talk about it here in the next round. Next, we are going to talk about the last game of that Sunday slate. That was the Ravens at Bengals. Of course, the Bengals won 24-17. This was a really back and forth game the entire time. I mean, you have the quarterbacks, Tyler Huntley with 17 for 29, 228 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. That's a good stat line. Then you got Joe Cool, 209 yards and 1 touchdown. You know, really my biggest takeaway from this game is in football, 1 or 2 plays can make or break you. That's what I've always been told, and I have seen it live, and I've also seen it on TV in this game because that's exactly what happened. Thinking back to this game, you're going to know what I'm talking about. It was that big play that happened when the Bengals linebacker Logan Wilson forced a fumble on the goal line and was picked up and taken 98 yards by the Bengals defensive end, Sam Hubbard, for a touchdown. I think that won the game for the Bengals. Because after that, the Ravens, you know, they had like 3 plays and a punt, 5 plays and a punt, 10 plays, and then the end of the game on a 4th and 20. It's just 1 or 2 plays can make or break you in football, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, shout out to Mike Tirico, too, as a broadcaster, hearing his call. I mean, being able to bring up that Sam Hubbard was a Cincinnati native, I loved it. I loved every bit of that. And just good for Sam Hubbard. I mean, that guy just grinds on that defensive line. Logan Wilson, he seems to be everywhere, too, as a linebacker. He's great. That's a great tandem right there they have on that defense. Just really, really good play. And it could have went either way for either team. I mean, I think that if the Ravens would have got that touchdown in, you know, it was a little interesting on what happened with that touchdown. You know, Tyler Huntley ended up jumping over the line, even though he had people behind him coming to push him. I remember Chris Collinsworth was not happy about that. He had all kinds of stuff saying, you do not need to leave your feet. And I get that. You really do not need to leave your feet because you have people behind you pushing, just like the Eagles usually do. So just, I don't know. It's easier said than done. I mean, of course, in person, you think you're going to be able to jump up and pull that. Cam Newton, you know, shout out to that 2015 team that basically did that every play, like for every touchdown. But just like I said, 1 or 2 plays can make or break you. The Bengals could have easily lost that game, but they found a way to win. And then, of course, the Bengals would go on to play the Bills in the next week. But before we dig into that next week, there is one more game that we need to talk about, and that was the Monday Night Football game, Cowboys at Buccaneers. And, of course, everyone knows because it was very, very well watched. But the Cowboys won 31-14. Really dominant performance from the Cowboys. I was really impressed. And I was honestly really impressed with Dak Prescott in this game, too. I mean, Dak Prescott, 25 for 33 for 305 yards and 4 touchdowns. Then, of course, the Cowboys tight ends. And before I dig in there, I think the Cowboys tight ends are some of my as one of my favorite, like, overall position groups in the NFL. I don't know what it is, just all their guys they have in their tight end group. I just love. I don't know why it is. I can't explain it. You know, they're right up there with like the Eagles offensive line for my favorite like groups of play, like position groups in the entire league. But they really are. But I mean, like in this game, Dalton Schultz, 7 receptions, 98 yards, 2 touchdowns. And the biggest thing in this game, and I know I keep saying that for every game, but really there's always 1 or 2 things that stand out to me in every game. And what stood out to me in this game was Tom Brady. Tom Brady, 35 for 66 for 351 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And you might be thinking, that's not that bad of a stat line, but let me go back here. 35 completed passes of 66. 66 passes. That's ridiculous for a 40-something-year-old. That's crazy. He does not want to throw the ball that much. And I don't know, the Bucks just could not get going at all this game. I mean, while running 80 plays, they were only able to get 52 yards rushing, relying way too much on the arm of Tom Brady. And that's been really the Bucks' weakness all year long. They have not been able to get a running game going all year. And that's been in part of, some injuries on the offensive line. Of course, everyone's going to think of Ryan Jensen. He's a dog. I love that guy. He is a dog. That center, he is not afraid to get down and dirty to get the job done. And that's a big reason why their running game never worked this year. They also lost one of their tackles. And just Leonard Fournette just did not play like he usually does. And that's just been their problem all year. And it reared its ugly head hard in this game. And, of course, because of that, the Bucks actually fired offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich. A crazy turnaround for him. I mean, from getting head coaching talks the year before to getting fired, I don't know. Just really a dominant performance from the Cowboys. Not a good showing from the Buccaneers. And, the Cowboys would go on to play the 49ers. So, in the next round, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but it might be a good time just to kind of work this in, because I was going to talk about it later, but I don't really see the difference now. But of course, everyone knows now that this was Tom Brady's last football game. That's right. In case you've been living under a rock, Tom Brady has retired from the NFL. And it's been a couple of days, so I'm not going to just dig into it too hard, but just my original thoughts was, man, I mean, it's pretty crazy that he's played this long, that he's had the success that he's had. It's easy to hate on the guy because he's been so successful, but I'm happy for him, and I hope this is it for him. It's really hard for these guys to retire because they're just so competitive, and I think that was a big reason as to why he even came back for this year, because he's just got so much competitiveness in him that he just couldn't go away from it. And, I know there's a whole lot of stuff that's happened to him this year. I don't want to get into it because, that's been, I don't want to just beat that drum. But I'm happy for him that he's actually going out on his own terms. I know that this game definitely wasn't the way he wanted to go out, but he has a lot in front of him, both at Fox and both with his family. I mean, both of his kids are, I think, teenage years now. So, I mean, they're going to be playing sports, and he gets to enjoy all that now without the hustle and bustle of being an NFL quarterback, and definitely not without the hustle and bustle of being the NFL's best quarterback. So, good for Tom Brady. Good for him. And the only bad thing about him retiring is that I love Greg Olsen in the Fox booth. I think he's a great color commentator. So I was like, if there was one thing about Tom Brady retiring I didn't like, it's just that he's eventually going to have Greg's job. But come to find out, Tom Brady's going to take a year off of broadcasting. So Greg's going to have another year. So I'm really happy for him there. So it's going to be interesting to see how Fox does that. But good for Tom Brady. Glad he got to retire. And my advice to him, man, just let it be for good. Let it be for good. Enjoy the rest of your life. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into the divisional round. This was, the NFL has really had a great playoffs. They really have. There's only been a couple of games that have been blowouts. We're going to talk about at least one or two of them blowouts in this block here. But it's been really great. It's been a really great playoffs. I'm actually really happy that I'm going back through them and kind of digging back in here. As of recording this podcast here, only 2 days before the Super Bowl. It's a Friday, so we have Saturday and Sunday. So I'm really, really excited, and I'm happy I'm digging back through these. So I'm actually glad I'm being able to do this. But the first game of the weekend, I remember this game a lot because I was rooting really hard for one of these teams, and they lost. But that kind of gives it away a little bit. But it is Jacksonville at Kansas City. Of course, Kansas City won 27-20. Biggest storyline out of this game was Mahomes' injury. And even with this ankle injury, it happened in the first half. I believe some defensive linemen were tackling him, bringing him down, and one of them landed on his ankle. He got up, started limping around. You could definitely tell something was wrong with him. But of course, you know the competitor that Mahomes is. He's not going to leave the game. So, I mean, he did leave at I think it was the second quarter because Chad Henne came in. My guy, Chad Henne, he won a playoff game for the Chiefs about a year or two ago against Baker Mayfield of all quarterbacks. But, even with Mahomes' injury, he was still 22 for 30 for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns. He came in that second half and played really well. He was limited, but he played really well. Yeah, of course, Travis Kelce just continued. I mean, he's just an animal out there in this game. 14 receptions for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. As a tight end, I might want to add, just in case you don't know. Of course, you probably know, but he's a tight end putting up all these numbers. And it was really a back and forth game. I think Mahomes' injury definitely allowed Jacksonville to hang around. If he was full blast the whole time, I mean, the way he looked on that first drive, I don't know. It might have still been this close, but it definitely was closer because of Mahomes' injury. But thinking about what did Jacksonville in, they really had a back-breaking fumble when they were driving to the goal line. I believe it might have been the fourth quarter. Right before the fumble, Trevor Lawrence had an amazing scramble for 12 yards to keep the drive alive, and then next play, throws it to his receiver. He tries to make a move, fumbles on the Kansas City 3-yard line. I was upset. I knew as soon as that happened that the game was over, and lo and behold, the Jaguars were unable to get anything rolling afterwards. And I said before that I was really rooting for the Jaguars because I really do like Doug Peterson. I love Trevor Lawrence. And then, of course, one of their starting offensive guards ended up going to my high school. So, I was cheering for him. I wanted him to move on. I wanted them all to move on. But, sometimes you just got to enjoy what you've had. And Jacksonville's really got a bright future ahead of them. So, I wouldn't be too disappointed. Who would have thought you'd be in the divisional round playing the Chiefs anyway and in the game? So, props to Doug Peterson for going in there and turning that team around. I mean, coaching matters. I talked about it in the last episode. Coaching matters, and Doug Peterson is the number one poster boy for that because he completely turned that team around with a culture change and just bringing in his philosophies and not, Urban Meyer's philosophies. Urban Meyer. So, and honestly, this year might have saved Trevor Lawrence's career. It really was. I mean, if you can think back to last year with Urban, there was some talks about Trevor maybe being a bust. And I know that's big, but everybody likes recency bias. And, back last year, Trevor didn't play good at all. And there was a lot of talk about, is Trevor going to be the guy in Jacksonville? Is he just going to flame out? And then, just all of that changed this year. I mean, Trevor is a guy. He's going to be a guy. They have invested around him. They've done everything right. So now it's just time to keep building. So if you're Jacksonville, keep your head up. And of course, Kansas City would go on to play the Bengals in the AFC Championship. But we will talk about that in a little bit. First, though, we're going to talk about this game. And it's going to be a quick one because it was a blowout. New York at Philadelphia. Dominant 38-7 win by the Eagles. I mean, really on both sides of the ball, Philly just had their way with New York, with the Giants. Offensively, they were led by Jalen Hurts, 16 for 24, 154 yards, and 2 touchdowns. You see, that's the thing I love about the Eagles. They don't have to throw the ball 66 times like Tom Brady. They can just throw the ball 24 times and still be very, very efficient, especially when they got guys like Kenneth Gainwell in the backfield, 12 carries for 112 yards and 1 touchdown. And Miles Sanders, 17 carries for 90 yards, 416 total yards from the Eagles offense. And then you got to talk about that defense, too. That defensive line, of course, led by Hassan Reddick, 5 tackles, with 4 of them being solo tackles and 1 for a loss. He had 1.5 sacks, along with 3 QB hits. Really led that Eagles defense that held the Giants to 227 yards. They had 5 sacks on Daniel Jones as well. Like I said, just dominant performance from this Eagles team. Absolutely. I mean, just from the start to the finish. And New York had a lot of momentum behind them, too, coming off that win in Minnesota. So it's just like, really, it was like a flat tire. It's like when you get in your car and you're driving down the road and you just hear something weird and come to find out your tire's flat. Yeah, that's kind of how it feels to be a New York fan in this game. Just kind of like, just your tire's flat. Yeah, or you have your favorite balloon and somehow you let go of it and it flies away, and you look up and you just watch it fly away. That's kind of like what it felt like. I can imagine for a New York fan. But just a kind of a disappointing end to an encouraging season. Just could not get anything going. Had 4 3-and-outs. Lots of very, very short drives. But just like, even though I'm saying stuff like, the flat tire and the balloon, at least you got to know that, hey, we got a bright future ahead of us. Definitely brighter than we had with Joe Judge. I don't mean to throw shade at Joe Judge, but I mean, the future, you're going to be just fine with Brian Dable as your head coach. I mean, just fine. A lot to build on. So don't stare up at that balloon too much. Know that you've got a couple more in your house that you can go to. I don't know why I keep talking about balloons. But yeah, so very, very encouraging future for the Giants. And of course, great job by the Eagles. They would, of course, go on to play the 49ers in the NFC Championship. We have 2 more games left in the divisional round. The first one, the Cincinnati at Buffalo. Really, this one was kind of a blowout too, even though it says 27-10. I mean, the Bills were really, really dominated by Cincinnati's lines. They really did. I mean, you got to think about the offensive line of Cincinnati in this game. They protected Joe Burrow the best they have almost all year. Only 1 sack allowed in this game. They let him to go 23 for 36 for 242 yards and 2 touchdowns. Cincinnati had a total of 412 yards, 240 through the air, 172 on the ground. Just dominant performance from the offense. And then the defensive line, 1 sack. They allowed 3.2 rushing yards per attempt, 64 total yards on the ground. And of course, they were led by DJ Hill. He had 3 tackles, 2 passes defended, and 2 QB hits as a defensive lineman. So their defensive lines just really dominated the Bills all game, and that kind of did them in. And the offense never showed up for the Bills. Josh Allen only 25 for 42 for 264 yards, no touchdowns, and 1 interception. He had a 55.6 QBR. Not a good game for Josh Allen. Not a good game. Another interception. I talked about, in the Dolphins game that he kind of turned into a little bit of like turnover prone towards this season. I mean, really this whole season, but just costly in a game like this. And of course, I talked a little bit a while ago, but the Bills just could not get their running game going. I mean, their top rusher was Josh Allen. Josh Allen, their quarterback, was their top rusher. And it's not like Danny Dimes from the Vikings game. Josh Allen only had 26 yards. That's your quarterback as your leading rusher with only 26 yards. And usually if Josh Allen's your leading rusher, you'd hope he'd have more than that. But no. I mean, their top receiver was Dawson Knox. He only had 5 receptions for 56 yards. So really just a deflating performance from the Bills. And I think like on the defensive side, they really missed a player like Von Miller. I mean, I think Von Miller's injury, along with Josh Allen's, turning turnover prone, doomed this Bills season. And, I've said that, disappointing ends a lot during this, first 30 minutes that I've been talking, but I think this is the most disappointing loss in the playoffs so far. Maybe in the next round there might be one that might rival it, but I think just Buffalo in general, all the expectations they came in this season with, they were like Super Bowl bound. People were putting a lot of bets and money on them to win the Super Bowl, and just could not get anything going. And like I said, you lose a guy like Von Miller on that defense. He is a leader. And then you got Josh Allen, who just really hasn't played good in a little while. And, you got to ask yourself, are the Bills really for real? Because you got to think going into the next season, they're going to have the same amount of hype. But it's just like, is it worth it? Is it warranted? I don't know. The Bills still have a lot to prove. And I think they even have more to prove in my eyes than they did like going into this season, because it just seems like every year it's the same kind of thing. The Bills just, something happens. I know last year you can't really blame them for how the coin toss did, but then again, you kind of can blame them last year because the defense couldn't get a stop. Then, of course, this year just could not get anything going offensively, and then the defense just, I don't know, just got ran all over. I don't know. A lot of questions going into for this Bills team next year. Of course, they're going to get Von Miller back. I hope maybe Josh Allen's going to take some time this offseason, maybe get, start thinking about his play. I mean, he's improved every year. He's always worked on stuff. So I got a lot of faith in Josh Allen. Just a lot of questions for Buffalo rolling into next year. And then, of course, the Bengals are going to go on to play the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship. Then, of course, the last game of this divisional round, Dallas at San Francisco. And going into this game, I knew what it was going to be. I knew that it was probably going to be a defensive battle, because going into this game, both of these teams have phenomenal defenses. I know what a lot of people were saying after this game, that the Cowboys' demise was really Dak Prescott. I really hate to say that, because Dak probably had one of his best games as a Cowboy in the last round against the Buccaneers. Stark contrast compared to how he played this game. Stark contrast, because he finished the game 23 for 37 for 206 yards, 1 touchdown, and of course 2 interceptions. And, talking about Josh Allen, turnovers, it was honestly, Dak has been worse this year with turnovers. It's been a problem all year long. It's like every game you knew at least Dak was going to give the other team 1 or 2 interceptions. And, the week before against the Buccaneers, that had me thinking Dak is going to be the guy for this Cowboys team. But after watching this game, I don't know. He's got a lot to work on. But, just both interceptions this game were followed by quick field goal drives for the 49ers. And you look at the score, I mean, that's basically the game right there. I mean, you got to think, if the Cowboys would have just took care of the ball, if Dak would have just took care of the ball, that it wouldn't have been they might have actually won this game. But I don't know. I wonder, would Cooper Rush have won this game? My honest opinion, a lot of people were saying yeah, but I don't think Cooper Rush would have won this game. I think the 49ers defense would have made anyone look like this. I want to kind of pump the brakes a little bit, especially for me, myself, on Dak. I mean, I think anybody would have looked bad against this 49ers defense, because they really did a great job of, making him make mistakes. And, I mean, even with Dak's mistakes, I mean, CeeDee Lamb still ended up with 10 receptions for 117 yards. I mean, if you're a Cowboys fan, I mean, this is really the main thing to look at. I mean, I know that, I think this game might have been a little different too if Tony Pollard wouldn't have got hurt. That was a big loss for the Cowboys. But, going into this game, I really thought it was going to be a defensive matchup, and it really did live up to the hype, because both teams were held around 300 yards, both about 200 passing yards, and the 49ers just had 30 more yards rushing. Really the difference of this game was Brock Purdy, and it's not because he really played well. He just played better than Dak. Purdy only completed 19 passes for 19 of 29 for 214 yards. He really didn't play his best game. And, it's just that he took care of the ball. He had a huge play to George Kittle. I mean, Kittle really made that play. It's when Kittle was bobbling the ball. I mean, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and look. That kept the 49ers drive going. And just like I said, Purdy didn't have his greatest game, but he still edged out Dak because of the turnovers. And that's really why the 49ers won. So, of course, the 49ers will go on to play the Eagles in the NFC Championship. So, starting off on the conference championships, we'll go right into the 49ers at Eagles, the NFC Championship. Of course, you're probably going to know the Eagles ended up winning 31-7. Biggest storyline for me from this: Brock Purdy tore his UCL very early in this game, and it really doomed the 49ers. The 49ers offense struggled mightily with backup quarterback Josh Johnson. Only had 164 total yards. The only points came from a big Christian McCaffrey run. The Eagles knew they needed to take advantage by running the ball, and that's exactly what they did. 44 attempts for 148 yards, almost 40 whole minutes of possession. Then, of course, Josh Johnson got hurt as well, and just totally bad luck. Bad luck here from the 49ers. Purdy went back in, but he couldn't throw the ball. All he could do is just pass the ball. So it was like he wasn't in the game. And there was just no way the 49ers defense could keep up in this game with as much work they were having to do. Just really disappointing for Kyle Shanahan. I'm starting to think he might be cursed. Like, it seems like every year something happens that ends up just dooming him. I don't know what it is. I mean, you gotta go back all the way to that Falcons Super Bowl and be like, is Kyle Shanahan really cursed? I don't know. He very well could be. But come to find out, Purdy tore his UCL, like I said earlier. So no wonder he couldn't throw the ball. His UCL was torn. So I don't believe he's got surgery yet, but I think he might have some kind of surgery so that he could play next year, because he very well could be the starting quarterback for this 49ers team. They already said Jimmy G is not coming back. I kind of agree with that, especially since you got two young guys. Of course, the organization is going to want Trey Lance to start, but, like, come on now. This guy won, 12 straight? And then he got hurt. If he wouldn't have got hurt, they very well could have won this game. But the Eagles are just good. And some people think that if Purdy didn't get hurt, that the 49ers would have won this game. I tend to think that the Eagles still would have won, but it would have been a lot closer. I personally think that the Eagles still would have won. But, either way, your Eagles are the NFC champions and rolling into the Super Bowl with 2 blowout wins. So, moving along to the Bengals at the Chiefs for the AFC Championship. Chiefs win 23-20. Of course, everyone knows it was off a game-winning kick with 3 seconds to go on the clock. Just an unreal game. And there's it stirred up a bunch of mess, this game did. But, before I get into that, just looking at this Chiefs team, came in and really just shut all the noise up that was happening before. This game has noise all over. It had noise before the game, noise during the game, noise after the game. Really came in and shut up all the noise, this Chiefs team. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, everyone was afraid that his ankle would cause him problems, but it clearly did not, because he went 23 for 43 for 326 yards and 2 touchdowns. And so, I think people really forget how good of a pocket passer Mahomes is. He's a great pocket passer. And while he can't, do all the scrambling and all of that, I still think that his ability to be in the pocket and his ability just to kind of shuffle around still a little bit, I think people really underestimated his play. They got a big receiving game from someone not named Kelsey. That's always huge. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 6 receptions for 116 yards and 1 touchdown. That's really big for a Chiefs team, especially since Kelsey usually is the focal point. To have somebody else come in, get over 100 yards and a touchdown, really nice. Now looking at the Bengals, it's definitely not their best game offensively. Joe Burrow, 26 for 41 for 270 yards, 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. Definitely don't like those 2 interceptions at the end after we just got done talking about Dak later on. But T. Higgins and Jamar Chase both were under 100 receiving yards, and the offensive line struggled a lot, allowing 5 sacks. And I don't know if all 5 of them sacks came in the first half, but I believe a bunch of them came in the first half. Then, of course, everyone thinks of that costly penalty, just a huge unnecessary roughness call on Joseph Asai. Allowed the Chiefs 15 yards, prime positioning for that field goal at the very end. A lot of people talking about the refs during this game, that they messed up a lot, that the game might have been rigged. The game isn't rigged. The NFL is not rigged. The amount of time, effort, money that would have to go into rigging an NFL game is ridiculous. There's no way that this game was rigged. And I believe that the refs just need to get better. They just need to put more resources into making the refs better. And I think that would be more beneficial than standing on a soapbox and saying that the NFL is rigged, because it's not. My take is Bengals probably shouldn't have given the Chiefs that much bulletin board material. I mean, I saw the video of the two players during the Bills game calling Arrowhead Burrowhead. And then I saw the Cincinnati Mare. And I had a sinking feeling that the Chiefs were probably going to win because of that. I mean, you got to think Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce, we're going to use that as bulletin board material. The best team in the world. You don't think they use bulletin board material to win games? Well, this is all of the evidence you need. So shout out to all the mayors out there. Please learn your lesson from this and don't do this again. Please do not call the quarterback, your quarterback, the dad of the opposing team's quarterback, especially if this is the same team that destroyed the Raiders after they took their bus around the stadium again. Another lap around the stadium. I don't know if you remember that, but like the Raiders won in Arrowhead, took the bus around the stadium one more time. The next game, I think the Chiefs absolutely destroyed them. So don't do that. If you want my advice, just don't do it. So yeah, so the Chiefs win 23-3. They win the AFC Championship, and they are going to the Super Bowl. So yeah, Super Bowl, Eagles versus Chiefs in Arizona. I'm recording this right now before the Super Bowl happens, so I'm going to go ahead and make my pick. And if the episode comes out after the Super Bowl, I'll be sure to add a little bit about me talking about the Super Bowl and my predictions. But since I'm recording it now before, I'll go ahead and give my pick and a little bit of why I'm giving my pick this way. And then I will, like I said, I will record a reaction, attach it to the end of this block, and then go from there. But Super Bowl in Arizona, Eagles versus Chiefs. My pick to win. There's a drum roll if you don't know. Eagles win 38-23. The offensive and defensive line of the Eagles, I think, are going to disrupt these Chiefs. And I think the Eagles' offense is going to continue to roll. Don't think it's going to be a blowout. I'm not going to sell the Chiefs short. They very well could win this game, but I think the Eagles are going to find a way to win it all. I really do. I think their offense with Jalen Hurts and the running backs, with that offensive line, and then I think that defensive line paired with that secondary, I think those are just two great pairings. You have the backfield of the Eagles with their, offensive line, then you have their defensive line with their backfield of the defense with the cornerbacks and safeties. They're just really well built from the ground up. And not saying that the Chiefs are. It's just I think that the Eagles are more, they have a better, they just have better, older and more experienced groups than the Chiefs. I heard some people talking about the Chiefs secondary, how they're like all really, really young. Well, that could pop up in this game a little bit when you got a lot of crap going on with the Eagles offense. I mean, they always have a lot of motion, a lot of creativity, and I mean the Chiefs are the same way. So that's why I think they're going to stay in it. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. The Eagles have had 2 blowouts in this playoffs. I don't think that's going to happen again. But I do think that the Eagles are going to be the Super Bowl champs. I just think they're too good. I think it's been their year all year long, and I think they're going to pull it out. I think it's one of those. So yeah, 38-23 Eagles. So we'll see if I'm right or not. It's been a really, really, really good playoffs. A lot of disappointing ends for teams. And you got the Bengals, the Bills, the Vikings, all disappointed. Then you got a lot to look forward to for some of these teams. The Cowboys were disappointing, definitely disappointing. But then you got a lot to look forward to. You got like Jacksonville and New York, who ended up making it farther than they probably thought. Then you got the 2 teams at the very end, possibly the best 2 teams for either side. There's a lot going for like the 49ers. Were they better than the Eagles? But that's going to have to look at that next year with Purdy back. I mean, football happens, so you can't be mad. That's just football. Sometimes you just got to have things go your way, and the Eagles, they've had things going their way all year long. So, yeah, so I'm going to take a quick break. All right. All right, so we are back. So I said that I was going to swing back through and do a little recap of the Super Bowl really quickly. So here we are, a couple of days removed. It's Wednesday after the Super Bowl. So let's just dive right into it. So I was a little wrong on my picks, not surprising, but I picked the Eagles to win 38-23, but the score was actually 38-35 Chiefs. So I had the winning score right of 38, but of course the wrong team, and then of course the wrong losing score, so I'm not going to count it as a win. I'm not going to count it as a win. But I think it was a really great Super Bowl. Both quarterbacks played really well. You had Jalen Hurts, 27 for 38 for 304 yards and 1 touchdown through the air. And then, of course, on the ground, he had 15 carries for 70 yards and then 3 touchdowns. That's ridiculous. 3 touchdowns on the ground. That's a Super Bowl record. That's what Panthers fans like me wanted Cam to do in the Super Bowl in 2015. And, of course, that just didn't go our way there, but didn't go there the Eagles' way either. But still, that's a great performance right there. You look back at the fumble loss, that was definitely a big play, but it didn't make or break the Eagles. But then you had the man himself, Patrick Mahomes, 21 for 27 for 182 yards and 3 touchdowns. It got rolled up a bit in the first half. Didn't mess him up at all. He limped a couple of times. He definitely was in pain, but whatever they did on the sideline definitely helped him out. And he got the Super Bowl MVP, broke that curse of the regular MVP losing the Super Bowl. Broke that because he got the Super Bowl MVP. First time since like 1999 with Kurt Warner that happened. So that's pretty big. But going in, I knew it was going to be a tightly contested matchup. And the first half looked like it. That I was actually going to be wrong about that because the Eagles, it almost looked like they were going to run away with it. I mean, they went into halftime 24-14 the score. And they were keeping Kansas City off the field, and they were moving the ball really, really well. But that changed in the second half as Kansas City scored on every possession they had. I think it was like 17 points in the fourth quarter. That's ridiculous. Had those 2 wide open touchdowns to Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney, the corn dog play or whatever. Andy Reid caught it, worked twice, back-to-back drives, wide open touchdowns. And they really just limited the Eagles' offense to just field goals. And they had a pivotal 3 and outs. And you can't kick field goals to beat the Chiefs. You just can't, especially when they're firing at all cylinders like they are or like they were. The Eagles' defense was just not able to get a stop in the second half, and that's why they lost. And you look back as the reason why Kansas City really just started running the ball really, really well, and it was like the Eagles' defense was not ready for that. They were ready for the passing attack, but like Isaiah Pacheco had a monster second half. The guy runs so hard. And then even Patrick Mahomes with a high ankle sprain had a huge second half running the ball. So I don't know. And it seemed like the Eagles really stopped running the ball. They tried. I mean, of course, they were behind, so they had to pass the ball more. And then the thing that everyone's talking about is that penalty, that holding penalty in the fourth quarter with the Chiefs driving to get that field goal to win the game. James Bradbury on Juju Smith-Schuster ended up holding Juju Smith-Schuster. Got the flag, 15 yards, Chiefs. They scored the winning field goal not long after that. And I'm with Greg Olsen here. The refs actually had called the game pretty well all the way through. I don't believe there was any defensive holding at all in the game until that point. So it's just like, why do you choose to throw the flag there and not the entire game? I was listening to a sports show talking about how defenses, it's almost like pitching and almost like hitting. it's like, okay, the umpire today, he has a short strike zone, so make sure that, you leave stuff up that's high or low, or you say like, hey, the umpire's got a big strike zone, so even if it looks close, swing at it. Well, it's kind of like that with the refs. Like, okay, guys, look out, the refs are calling everything today. Don't even put your hands on the defenders. Well, that wasn't the case in this Super Bowl. The refs were actually pretty good calling. They were letting them play it out, and it's just like, it's so weird that they decided to call it at that point in time. And I mean, even I can admit it was holding. He had his hand on there. It was the right call, but it's just like, it wasn't the right call in the context of the game. Like, you can't not call that the entire game, then decide to throw it at the very end. But, at the end of the day, the Eagles should have just played better in that second half. They didn't. The Chiefs did, and they won. So good for the Chiefs. Good for the Eagles to make it that far. As of the recording of this video, they have lost both of their offensive and defensive coordinators. So it's going to be an interesting year in Philly next year as they get new coordinators. But, of course, the Chiefs, I don't think they're losing many people. They got a very young team, and they're already getting counted out again in the Super Bowl odds. So look out for them. But it was a very good Super Bowl. I even liked the Super Bowl halftime performance, but we won't talk about that because we're talking about football. But good Super Bowl all around, good playoffs all around, and then, of course, another great NFL season. So, yeah, I think that's going to be all my thoughts on the Super Bowl. I wanted to hit it really quick and then finish up this episode. So, yeah. All right, everyone, that's the end of episode 2. I ran through the playoffs into the Super Bowl, had some Super Bowl predictions. Of course, they ended up being wrong, but, who's keeping count here? Definitely not me. But I think it was a great second episode. Glad I got to dive back into the Super Bowl and then the playoffs itself. Like I said before, it was a great playoffs, great NFL season. I'm super fired up for the next one. Hopefully in the next episode, we dive into some NFL coaching talk, maybe even some draft predictions and that kind of stuff. So I'm excited for that. But in the meantime, I hope everyone has a great rest of their week.